there is a robin in your garden that you have been watching without really seeing. It arrives at the same time every morning, works the same section of the border, cocks its head to one side in that way that has been described as charming and curious by every nature writer who has ever mentioned it, and then moves on. You have watched this happen dozens of times, possibly hundreds of times if you have had the same garden for any length of time, and you have probably developed a set of assumptions about what is happening during those visits that feel so natural and so established that they have never needed examining. The head tilt is listening for worms. The robin is friendly and bold because it likes humans. The robin that visits your garden is the same robin every time. The robin is a gentle, peaceful bird, the nation's favorite, the Christmas card bird, the companion of the gardener. All of these things are either wrong or so incomplete that they function as wrong. And what the robin in your garden is actually doing during those visits is considerably stranger, considerably more strategic, and considerably more violent than the version of the story that fits on a Christmas card. Today we are going to follow that robin properly. We are going to track what it is doing from the moment it arrives in your garden to the moment it leaves. And we are going to find out what the head tilt is actually about. Why it is visiting specifically the section of the border it has chosen. Why it appears to tolerate you, and what is actually behind that apparent friendliness. What kind of territorial system it is operating inside. And how violently it defends that system, and why the robin singing beautifully from your fence post at dusk is not doing what you think it is doing. By the end, I think you will understand why ornithologists who study Erithacus, rubecula, consistently describe it as one of the most cognitively sophisticated, territorially aggressive, and behaviourally complex small birds in the temperate world, and why that assessment is almost perfectly incompatible with the image most people carry of it. Let us start with the head tilt. Because it is the behaviour most people think they understand and most completely misread. When a robin cocks its head to one side while working the soil surface of your garden border, it is not listening for earthworms moving underground. This is the explanation that appears in almost every popular account of robin behaviour, and it is, by the consensus of current avian research, incorrect. Robins do not have the auditory sensitivity to detect the movement of earthworms through soil at any depth that would be useful for locating them before they are at the surface. What the robin is doing when it tilts its head is positioning one eye to look directly downward at the soil surface. The robin's eyes are positioned on the sides of its head, a placement that gives it excellent wide-angle awareness for predator detection, but makes looking directly downward at close range difficult. The head tilt resolves this problem by rotating the skull so that one eye achieves a direct downward line of sight to the surface directly beneath the bird. The robin is not listening, it is looking. It is watching the soil surface with one eye positioned at the optimal angle for detecting movement. Specifically, the movement of an earthworm emerging at the surface or the slight displacement of soil particles that indicates something is moving just below it. This distinction matters because it changes the robin's identity from a bird with extraordinary hearing to a bird with extraordinary vision and the cognitive capacity to solve a geometric problem created by its own skull anatomy. And that cognitive capacity is, once you begin examining the robin's behavior systematically, one of the most consistently underestimated things about a bird that is consistently underestimated. The section of your garden border the robin has chosen to work is not random. It has not arrived in your garden and started searching from one end, and it did not choose this particular stretch of soil by accident. The robin has been mapping your garden. It has a spatial memory of the productive areas within its territory that is specific enough to know which sections of border currently hold the highest density of available prey, which areas have been recently disturbed and are therefore likely to have brought invertebrates closer to the surface, and which areas have already been worked recently enough that a second visit would be unproductive. The reason the robin appears to work the same section of your border on multiple consecutive visits is not habit or familiarity in the human sense. it is resource management. The robin is operating a foraging circuit across its territory that is timed and spatially organized to allow prey populations in each section to replenish between visits. It is not wandering, it is farming. The relationship between robins and gardeners, the thing that produces the Christmas card image of the robin perched on a spade handle watching you dig, is real, but it is not what most people think it is. Robins in the United Kingdom, and across much of their range, have developed a specific association with large mammal disturbance of soil. In woodland, that mammal was historically the wild boar, whose rooting behavior turned over significant quantities of soil and exposed the invertebrate life within it. In the domestic garden, that mammal is you. When you dig a border, when you turn compost, when you disturb soil in any way that exposes the layers beneath the surface, you are performing, from the robin's perspective, exactly the same ecological function as a rooting boar. The robin that watches you from a nearby branch and moves in close when you are digging is not expressing affection or trust or a preference for your company. It is exploiting a food source. The boldness and the apparent friendliness is a foraging strategy, not a social one. The robin is not your companion. You are its boar. This framing does not diminish the behavior. It makes it more interesting, because what it reveals is a bird that has mapped the behavior of large disturbing mammals, learned to tolerate the proximity of something that would in most circumstances represent a predator threat, and developed a specific response protocol for a specific type of resource opportunity that has only been available to the species in gardens and agricultural land for a fraction of its evolutionary history. The garden robin has, in a few thousand years of living alongside human cultivation, integrated human digging behavior into its foraging strategy with a precision and a confidence that represents a genuine and recent evolutionary development. Now here is the part that will matter most to you as someone who has been watching this robin and developing an impression of it as peaceful, territorial, only in a mild decorative sense. The bird of Christmas and goodwill and gentle English gardens. The robin in your garden is operating a territory that it defends with a level of aggression that is, relative to its body size and the lethality of the encounters it is willing to risk, extraordinary by the standards of British garden birds. Robin territorial disputes are not displays. They are not largely symbolic confrontations in which the weaker bird retreats before contact is made. They are physical fights, frequently sustained ones, and they result in death often enough that territorial conflict is considered one of the primary causes of adult robin mortality in the United Kingdom. Robins kill each other. They do so regularly, over the borders of the territory you think of as your garden, and the bird you are watching work your border has almost certainly been involved in, and survived, territorial encounters that would be described as brutal. If they occurred between animals you were more inclined to take seriously, the redbreast is the instrument and the symbol of this aggression simultaneously. Experiments conducted by David Lack, whose 1943 study of the robin remains one of the foundational works of behavioral ornithology, demonstrated that a mounted stuffed robin with a red breast placed within a robin's territory provoked immediate and sustained attack, while a complete juvenile robin lacking the red breast provoked almost no territorial response. The red breast is a signal of adult status and territorial presence, and any adult robin that enters another's territory and displays its red breast is issuing a challenge that the resident bird is neurologically compelled to respond to. The robins you see in your garden during winter, apparently coexisting peacefully at different points around the boundary, are not sharing a space. They are operating at the outer edges of overlapping territories, each one aware of precisely where the boundary lies and maintaining just enough distance to avoid triggering the response that a closer approach would provoke. The singing deserves its own examination, because it is, of all the robin's behaviors, the one most completely understood in one way and most thoroughly misunderstood in another. Robins sing in winter, which is unusual among British birds and which has always been understood as a sign of year-round territorial maintenance, rather than purely seasonal breeding advertisement. What is less widely understood is that in winter, female robins hold territories independently of males and sing to defend them using the same song the male uses, making the robin one of the very few British bird species in which both sexes hold and vocally defend independent winter territories. The robin sinking from your fence post at dusk in December is not necessarily male. It is not necessarily singing because it is content or because the fading light has moved it to express something. It is broadcasting a territorial claim to every other robin within earshot, mapping the acoustic boundary of a piece of ground it is prepared to fight and possibly die for, and it is doing this in the fading light because acoustic conditions at dusk often allow song to travel further than during the noisier daytime hours. The beauty of it is real. The purpose of it is entirely strategic. In spring, the territorial dynamic shifts and becomes more complex rather than simpler. The male's winter territory becomes the core of a breeding territory, and the process by which a female is admitted to that territory is less a courtship in the romantic sense and more a carefully managed negotiation in which both the male's willingness to tolerate a red-breasted adult in his territory and the female's willingness to suppress her own territorial responses, long enough to establish a pair bond, are operating simultaneously against a background of genuine mutual wariness. The male feeds the female during this period, a behavior that functions both as nutritional provisioning and as a trust-building mechanism, gradually overriding the territorial response that would otherwise make close proximity between two red-breasted adults impossible. So what is the robin in your garden actually doing? It is managing a territory with cognitive tools that include spatial memory of resource distribution, tactical management of foraging circuits, exploitation of large mammal disturbance behavior, acoustic territorial broadcast tuned to optimal propagation conditions, and a readiness for physical combat that its appearance entirely fails to prepare you for. It is watching the surface of your border with one eye positioned at the geometrically optimal angle for surface movement detection. It is timing its foraging visits to the specific sections of your garden based on prey replenishment rates. It has been tracking across multiple visits, and it is tolerating your presence with the calculated pragmatism of an animal that has learned to treat you as a useful ecological disturbance rather than a threat. The next time it arrives, watch it properly. Watch which section of the border it goes to first and whether that section has been disturbed recently. Watch which eye it uses when it tilts its head and how long it holds that position before striking. Watch whether it sings from a high exposed point on your fence or from lower vegetation, because the height of the singing post tells you something about how the bird is prioritizing territorial broadcast versus predator exposure at that moment. You will not see a Christmas card bird. You will see something considerably more interesting. Have you ever watched a robin in your garden and noticed something about its behavior that surprised you or that you could not immediately explain? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one, and this is exactly the kind of story this community was built for. And if you want to understand another garden bird, one whose behavior in your garden is being shaped by a cognitive system that is even further from what most people assume, the next video is already waiting for you.